Hello, tabletop wargamers, and welcome to Tried and True, a podcast hosted by the Delaware Warmachine community. Join us as we dive deep into topics around our favorite games, exploring methods and techniques proven to enhance anyone's gaming experience.
Hello, my name is Erica, and welcome to this week's Battle Report on Tried and True. Just kidding, this one's a podcast. The guys are currently busy prepping for a big AU steamroller tomorrow at our brand new store location, so I will be your host for this episode. Big thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. You guys smashed our 500 subs goal. The second round of winners was just announced, so please make sure your emails are available on YouTube. If you like what you're listening to and enjoy the Warmachine deep dives and battle reports, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. As a new person entering the content creation scene on YouTube, I absolutely get why people ask you to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps tremendously and makes it easier for other people to find our content. Some other quick updates. Tried and True will be throwing down at the fields of battle at Nova, the Broker Brawl, and Warfare weekend. Speaking of the Broker Brawl, Seth, Art, and Steve all started a new podcast, the Broker Broadcast. Highly recommend if you're looking for an additional podcast to add to your Warmachine listening library. Those guys are a lot of fun, and they run an incredible team tournament. Go to the Broker Brawl. It's a great time. We'll add their info along with a few other friends of the channel in the show notes below. Now, with all the excitement of Mark IV and several people returning to the game, we thought it might be fun to host a special ladies interview with a very special guest. So without further ado, it's with great pleasure, on behalf of Tried and True, along with Delaware Warmachine, to invite the one and only Miranda, aka Wargamergirl.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your time with us tonight.
Well, I am definitely looking forward to some happy Mark IV chat.
Yes. So for those that might not be familiar with Miranda or the Wargamergirl channel, do you mind just giving us a quick spiel?
Yeah, so I started my channel back in 2012, doing Warmachine Mark II battle reports, kind of the early part of Mark II at the time anyway, and have just been doing a lot of battle reports for Warmachine and Hordes. And then I broke onto other games. I have some Space Hulk on there. I'm working on 40K stuff because, you got to cover everything. There's even some Malifaux games up on there if you ever check it out. But yeah, I run the channel Wargamergirl, and I'm mostly a Warmachine player. It was my first love, and so I'm excited to hopefully be able to come back to it.
That's awesome. So for this this special interview, we're kind of going to break this into 3 parts. So the first is want to get to know our guests a lot better. So I'm super curious. I love meeting with other folks in the community and getting their take on everything that's going on. The Mark IV hype, can't not talk about Mark IV right now. And then our deep dive discussion is women in wargaming. How can we spread the love of Warmachine and other tabletop games to our community? Okay, so you're saying that, so your first tabletop game was Warmachine?
Well, no, technically, actually, my first game was a game of 40K. I played some Sisters of Battle in 5th edition, actually. And I was up against some Space Marines or whatever. And so, you're just learning the rules on a little tabletop and whatever. And I just really remember walking away saying, my God, I hate sweeping advance. What stupid-ass rule is this where you have to... Sorry, I don't know what the rating is for your podcast. But... I hated it. I just didn't like the experience very much with how weird the rules were at the time. Like, things were so final really fast.
I'm trying to think. So 5th edition, about what was that, mid 2000s?
It would be, like mid 2000s. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so, I just didn't end up getting back around to it. And then Warmachine came out. I was living in Oklahoma at the time, and we were just at the game store, I'm trying to remember, and I saw the Warmachine stuff on the shelf, and I was like, these models look awesome. Like, look at these really cool things. And so as a kid, I always wanted the biggest, toughest, brawliest, biggest things. Like, I would drive a monster truck if I could somehow afford the gas for one. So, of course, Khador, I'm like, yes, Khador, the big robots, the biggest, the most stompy, give me. And, that really, but it was actually Mark I at the time. And so I didn't really know anybody to play with. And so I sort of had some minis that I put together for a little while, but didn't get back around to it till 2010, 11. And that was basically when Mark II had come out already, and then really picked it up from there. And that's when I really learned about more of this whole wargaming community and all the different skirmish games that were coming out. You had Malifaux and Infinity was coming out, and a myriad of other skirmish games have come out even since then. And so I kind of feel like I got in right before wargaming as a slightly more mainstream hobby really came to the fore.
Sure. Cool. And then what's your all-time favorite war game?
I mean, I do love me some Warmachine. Again, it was my first love. I felt like the rules were so clean and well written. I mean, the Mark II rulebook is really a testament to honestly really amazing rule wording. They give you cards. Here's the ability. Oh, by the way, here's the, brief of what that ability is on the card. There's so much easy to reference stuff. Whereas you don't have to, look at the data slate on one model and reference another book to see what this ability might be. It was just well combined. Now, you could say what you want about special rules and where that went, but the core rules of Warmachine Mark II were so perfect in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I feel bad that was the edition that I missed out on.
Yeah,
because I hear I hear it praised that it was a really good time to play.
But I mean, it was also obviously a hard game. Like Warmachine had this reputation for being a particularly difficult game to wrap your head around. And I think I also kind of like that because ooh, challenge, I'll do it. Because wargaming can sound like intimidating until you actually get into it. And then you're like, this isn't that hard. I mean, it's fine. But with Warmachine, there's so much memorization involved. And that would always be where my challenge was my challenge would be, because I'll play Khador and I'm like, oh yeah, I know what Vlad does. I know what Sorsha does. I know how these rules interact. I know how I can, wombo combo my stuff, but I don't necessarily know all the rules to Legion or all the rules to Circle. And now,
Yeah, Warmachine was always kind of like the Shadowrun of war games for me when it comes to tabletop stuff.
It can be super brutal, but I don't know. It was just a different, once you felt like you were any good at that, you just felt like you could learn any game easily. I will make the exception caveat. I still don't understand Infinity. I love that company. The models are really cool. Amazing community. I don't think I'll ever be able to play that game.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to try that one yet. I have a couple friends that play it. I've seen the tables. The tables are very elaborate.
Well, here in New Mexico, we had Rumble on Route 66, which ended up being at one point the largest Infinity tournament in the world. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was downtown at this, sort of downtown. It was at this local hotel that they would host. And yeah, the Guillermo was the effective press ganger for that down here. And he got so many people into Infinity. He really went above and beyond making a bunch of tables. A bunch of the community made all these gorgeous tables that you would just feel like you walked out of, I don't know, Blade Runner into or something. It was just
that's really
absolutely fantastic. They did a stunning job. It really is a super awesome community.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so we've had a couple of terrain making nights at our store too. That's another great way if you're trying to get your local groups together and to kind of integrate different gamer groups. So for us, we advertised our table terrain making night. We opened it up to everybody. We opened up to the D&D folks, the Warhammer guys, and it was really fun just to get everybody around the table, and we love showing off these tables on our battle reports and during our steamrollers. So yeah, if you're looking for some good community engagement that's not necessarily, rolling dice and smacking down, terrain and table making nights are fabulous.
That's a good point. Yeah, I can see a lot of people being a little more willing to come and try that first, just to say, see who they're going to be interacting with.
Yeah, for sure. And then you get to share different game systems and stuff. It's nice. It's cool.
Yeah. It's why you want a friendly local game store.
Yeah, so speaking of local game stores, what's the local gaming scene like where you live?
We've got a long history of different wargaming stores around here. I suppose the big one for my part of town that I'm in is Etten Games. There's another one in Texas, but this one is in Albuquerque, and they just recently moved locations, and they really lean a lot into, creating this very welcoming environment. They've got tables out so people can play their, 40K nights or whatever game nights, tons of RPGs, and it's just one of those really nice, clean stores. They did a really good job. Before that, we had Active Imagination that was actually around for 30 years or something, and they actually closed this year, which was kind of a weird end of an era.
Yeah.
Female run store, by the way.
Oh, awesome.
But she was like, I'm done. I'm like, okay, we love you, Mandy. Thank you for everything. And
yeah, shout out to Mandy.
yes. And then on the west side, because Albuquerque, we've got a river that runs right through the middle. And so even though it's all Albuquerque, we kind of have two halves of the city that people mostly stay in. And so the other side of town, we've got Twin Suns, and they have a lot of magic, and then they also do wargaming and stuff. It's just so far away, I don't usually end up getting to that one. And then
Sure.
we also technically have a Warhammer store, but that's kind of in the opposite corner of town from me, so I really never get there.
They've got like strict rules too. It's like you have to play GW games.
Oh, you have to play
Like,
there.
you
Yes,
can't even,
it has to be the newest
yeah,
edition.
you can't even like mention other games in that store.
Yeah, don't get me started on all that. But yeah, so as far as the gaming scene, I haven't seen too much of Warmachine lately. Like Mark III kind of was a getting off point for a lot of people. But, 40K has always been a healthy community. Albuquerque loves Infinity. As I mentioned, we've got a really strong Infinity meta here. And Albuquerque, for whatever reason, has always loved, and to this day still loves, Battletech, which I swear we'll try one of these days. Hardcore
Oh, wow.
Battletech.
Gosh. Yeah, I haven't heard of that game in like many moons.
Yeah. Well, it's been around so long, and it's one of
Yeah.
those games that's kind of an interesting example, right? Because you can look at it and say, well, if you run a game company, you need to be changing editions every so often, putting out models all the time, and Battletech's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, okay, cool. So with all these different, war games that you play, what is your favorite to create content for on your channel?
Okay, I guess my favorite kind of have been my Space Hulk battle reports, just because we are able to lean into them being a lot more cinematic. Just, the layout of the Space Hulk board. We took Sharpies and blacked out all the edges of the little game pieces, and then we have them set on velvet, so it creates this real darkness of space. And like, we went crazy just making this board game look as cinematic as we could. And every time I edit those, I'm just like, man, this is so pretty. I just love it. Because some of those models, man, like the details come out and they're just, they're so good. And then, you have the environment there, and that makes it really even better. And then, the gameplay is what it is, and it's a board game at the end of the day, and I don't know, 6s and 1s is kind of how Space Hulk rolls. And so the content comes together fairly quick. I also love doing Warmachine battle reports. I've done so many Warmachine battle reports, like checking dice rolls and double checking rolls, but those would always be kind of challenging because the game would go on long enough. Because anytime you record a game, as I'm sure you might be aware by now, it's going to take like 3 or 4 times longer than a normal game would take. And so you might come across the battle later while you're editing and be like, man, I messed up that roll.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things I really liked when we did our 50-point beta Mark IV bat rep. I was like, oh, wow, we're done in like a third of the time.
Wow. Well, with Mark IV, 50 points is fewer models again.
Mm-hmm. Well, even just like with the unit movement and everything, it just the time that I guess did take the longest is we had to go, and like reread, some of the rules, especially when it came to moving and charging and all that stuff. That was probably the slowest part about when we were filming ours. But it flowed pretty well. I think each player only exhausted like 30 minutes of their clock, if that.
Oh, okay.
By the time we got to the end of the game.
Do you expect that the tournament scene is going to see shorter death clocks for it? I don't know if those rules are out.
I'm not sure. So there's still, I guess, discussion on what is the next, like what's going to be the community standard format. Is personally, I think it's going to be 100 points. Maybe not immediately, because I think with Mark IV, it's going to take about 2 years for this thing to come online.
Okay.
So in the meantime, I wouldn't think it would be, that super uncommon to see 50-point or 75 steamrollers or tournaments for the first year or two Mark IV is out. Yeah, my bets are on 100 points. In terms of the death clock changing, I don't know, because Advanced Maneuvers, actually, they just had a really cool podcast interview with Mick Waters, and he was saying, if you take out rec options and Warcaster points, even at 75-point games in Mark III, you're still playing with over 100 points worth of models. So like you're between 100 and maybe 130 points if, you're not counting the Warcaster
right.
battle points and all that stuff. So maybe at like 100-point cutoff, maybe 45 minutes would be enough time or 60. I'm not sure.
I mean, back in Mark 2 and I think 3 as well, if you hit 100 points, you could technically take a second Warcaster. I wonder if they're keeping any of that.
Oh god, that would be insane with the rocks.
That would be kind of bananas. I don't know. I think I agree with you. I think staying smaller point scale, at least for the interim, would be wise, especially if you're trying to grow the audience again.
Yeah, and for us with our store and our community, we're going to pull them to see like, okay, what do our players want? Are they looking for this unlimited format? Are they looking for Prime? Are they looking for 50 points? Are they looking... I think you just have to like read your audience and kind of reach out and see what your community wants to do. It's a new time for all of us. That's one of the things that I'm most excited for Mark IV is it's a soft reset for everybody across the board, regardless of your experience or player skill. Mm-hmm. And we basically get to start over without jumping on a brand new IP. So I'm super excited about that.
So how do you feel about where the lore has gone? Do you follow much of the lore on that?
I am not like a consistent lore person,
okay,
but I know like with the jump, I think it's 15 years?
5.
Between...
Or 5 or 6
it's
years,
5.
yeah, because it's a 20
okay.
Or 618, and it was 612 before, so 618 now.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the jump. When they first premiered, like, the Storm Legion and the Orgoth, like, earlier this year, I had a couple reservations. I was like, oh, these guys look real, like, they look more sci-fi Warcastery to me and not so much, steampunk fantasy.
Yeah.
At the time. But, I mean, it's grown on me. I'm actually running a Shadow of the Seeker campaign right now at my store. We just did our first session last week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm learning the lore now.
Oh, the lore and those.
But no, I'm excited for like the tech jumps and everything. I'll be honest, I fell off the wagon hard with the Infernals drop. I actually quit the game for a year when it was like Archon Machine and Riot Quest models. I was like, ew, what is this?
Yeah,
I'm out.
I feel you there.
So I'm really glad that craziness got, addressed.
Did they mention with that list of stuff that's still going to be usable, like if Infernals was in there? Because I'd be happy if they weren't.
I'm not sure. Oh, what do you mean for Mark IV?
When they mentioned the like which stuff in Mark IV you're going to be able to still bring.
Oh, I'm not sure. I know Infernal, like the limited factions, they said are going to be Prime factions.
Oh, yeah,
they had
Infernals.
a list that came out.
Yeah,
so Infernals. Which Grimkin made the cut.
Yeah, I'm
yes.
so glad Grimkin making the cut was important. Infernals were, I hated them in the lore and I hate them on the table, but whatever.
I've actually never played them. So for the month of October on our channel, we're doing like spooky battle reports for October. So I'm going to get my Grimkin on the channel. And then Mike, who played Mercs on our 3rd episode, he has a whole Infernals army. So my very first play experience ever into Infernals will be on this battle report. So I'm pretty excited. I don't know what they do.
Just kill them dead as fast as you can. The longer they last, the worse it is.
Check. I see.
That's all I can give you. Just hurry.
So I guess this is a good, since we're talking about Mark IV, a good segue into Mark IV. So with this new edition, do you think, Wargamergirl, you're going to be working on any battle reports for Warmachine?
To be fair, I was going to anyway, even if there was nothing that ever happened with Mark III changing over. Like I actually was gearing back up to be like, okay, no, I was teaching my friends, I was involuntarily, drafting them into my fold of Warmachine play and teaching them how to play the game. Because I'm like, no, I really want to get back and do some battle reports. And we just need to build this community, or I just kind of need to build up a community again. And so that was already happening when Mark IV dropped, literally like in the middle of all that. And so I'm like, well, okay, guys, back to the trading table. Me too. But it's kind of cool because like you mentioned, it sort of levels the playing field. Everyone can kind of come at it from where they were, and being able to bring in legacy armies in addition to the new stuff, I think will be something people want to see. I'm probably going to stick with 50-point battle reports, at least for the interim, because editing really large battles is frustrating, let's say. So yeah, there will definitely be that. I'm really hoping I can get my hands on the full Winter Corps 50-point army because I am desperate to play them. I just want to.
Yeah, same. Same though.
Yeah.
So speaking of, these new models, so on your channel, you were doing like a, what was it? Like one of those live YouTube.
Yeah, like
I'm
the
old,
Hangouts.
so I don't know like what the terminology is for it. But yeah, like you were putting the models together. What was that like being able to, get your hands on these new 3D printed models?
Yeah, so I did an unboxing on the channel, and it was a live unboxing because they had sent it to me. I received it that morning, and I'm like, okay, well, I think it was that morning. But yeah, I didn't open anything. I was like, I'll just open it on the live stream. Let's just see, okay, these are 3D printed models. There was concerns, and I've dealt with 3D printing a fair bit. Like, I've got friends with resin printers. We do FDM stuff here. Like, I'm familiar enough with like 3D models that I'm not particularly worried about it. But at the same time, like, it's not an illegitimate concern of people. So I'm like, okay, well, let's just do an unboxing. Let's look at them. And so, yeah, I did. I opened up all the models on the 3 of them on the channel. I looked at all of the individual pieces. And like, there were a couple little print lines here and there, which I don't even think will show up after being primed, but I haven't gotten that far yet. So really, it was just demonstrating that. And I think it got a lot of people excited and kind of alleviated some concerns, because I think one of the things that had happened before was like beta models or untested models that were still really early had gone out to some people, maybe playtesters or something, and images of that had shown up online, and people were like, what is this? This doesn't look great.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And so it's like whenever you see an image, you're like, when is that from? Like, So this was just my attempt. Like, I don't know that they sent me like a particularly good one. I kind of doubt it. I think they just sent me like a normal one, right? And overall, like, the quality's there. I think they'll look really good on the tabletop. And there are some cool things you can do with 3D prints, like have models that you don't have to worry about undercuts like you do with an injection molding machine, or the frustration and slowness of dealing with like resins, if you've ever poured resins, which is another special thing that I've experienced.
See, I felt like an idiot when I was putting together my resin, like armored core, like my tanker models. I thought some of the pieces that were on it were part of the model. So I primed and painted. Pieces. Yeah, it was. I'm like, yeah, it's just a spike, I guess. I don't.
I mean, whatever. It happens. If you make it look right, it's fine. After the live stream, though, I finally got in and magnetized all of them, which was an interesting process. And I'm very proud of myself because I didn't confuse any of the magnets. And so everything just snaps on really nicely and connects really nicely. It took a little while. It's probably couple hours if you want to be like really diligent and glue it all together, right? So that's all cool. Now they just need to get primed and painted, but the interchangeability seems like it's pretty cool. The locking system, the actual arms and head have sort of these flanges on the pieces so that when you socket it into the body, it doesn't wiggle around like you might see on a normal magnet on a smooth surface where it can just move and sometimes get a little floppy on you. That locks it in, so they actually can still kind of keep a cool pose. Now, one thing I did notice that I'm like, oh, come on, guys, is there's so much overhang on the base still. Like, really, guys?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I think it's the dire wolf. It has this turned carapace, right? So it's like as if it's running. And so its body is turned one way and its hips are the opposite way. And so when you put the weapons on, they're just so far away from its body. And it's the design of the model way overhangs the base. And I'm like, I do wish that the bases got bigger for this new edition, not the 80 mil they're doing for Orgoth or special new models, but like if they just across the board increase the base size for the Warjacks, I think that would be a little bit cooler. Just makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah. So what were your initial thoughts about the Mark IV announcement?
I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I was genuinely surprised. I know there had been like, oh, there's big hype. Wait till the Primecast comes out on the 26th of July. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I'm like, maybe they'll kill off the Butcher. That'd be cool. And, I'm never going to get my wish on that, I think. But yeah, then they announced Mark IV. I'm like, oh, all right. It felt like it was about time. I think they mentioned it was like 6 years of Mark III. And Mark III had a bit of a rough release, let's say. And so I think there's a lot of cautious optimism. I actually put a poll out on my channel whenever that came out. I'm like, how do you guys feel about this? And, like 270 some odd votes on it. People being like, cautiously optimistic. I'm like, I think that's fair. That's a very valid place to be, because a lot of former players, so many players I know love the game, really enjoyed it, just kept getting their face bashed in every time they played that it just wasn't worth it to them anymore, even though it was, they were brought in by these really beautiful models and these really cool things. So cautious optimism there. Then they dropped the Mark IV rules, and that was super interesting because, there was some of the major changes, which, it was mentioned on one of your other videos with the playtester. Mentioned like, okay, facings are gone. Like that was huge. And I can remember like dealing with battles where it's like, okay, here's the laser pointer. Which way is that facing? Are you going to walk by? Are you going to be within 1 millimeter of my reach range? And you're going to take a free strike before you can make it into that charge range? And it's like, oh, that's interesting. Like there's a certain amount of granularity that's lost, but I understand it because there's a lot of time saved that way. And then of course all the drama around the unit movement, which is interesting. And I don't know, I'm just going to have to play test that to see how that feels.
Yeah, I don't know for those that are listening, our Mark IV bat rep where we had, Andy was playing with his errants and they were like the infinite repoing errands where at one point they were like 20 inches away from each other. And we posted like pictures, we posted video of this everywhere on Discord, Facebook, even people who were like playtesters for Mark IV and were like, where is this incorrect? Because we're looking all over this rule book. We're asking everywhere on the internet. Like, there's no way that this is correct. So I'm hoping out of like with the unit movement, I hope that gets addressed where repoing, have one model repo and then everybody else, moves to sync up within 2 inches of him, because the way it is now, it can get some pretty ridiculous charge angles.
Oh gosh, no kidding. Imagine what you can do with cavalry. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Cavalry's insane right now.
Yeah. Which, I mean, fine. They're fun to play, so hopefully. But that's kind of one of the nice things, right? They're like, well, this is the beta rules. Yeah, we've play tested it to a degree, but now it's like here out in the market. And so one thing we are familiar with our gamers doing is finding ways to break the game. So go do it now so we can fix it before it properly launches.
Yeah, and Dan brought up a point too, is that maybe these are beta rules from like 6 months ago, but this was the document that was ready to get released, versus maybe there is a more current copy of beta rules that are out there somewhere. They're just not ready to be publicly released yet.
Maybe. My understanding was like, they're like, no, these are pretty much the rules. This is just going to be like if there's some oh crap moment.
Our repo got to get looked at, Privateer Press.
Yeah, from the sound of that most likely, hopefully does get addressed. Because that would be so sad, right? It just launches and then immediately falls on his face because there's a bunch of people just posting like horrible abuses of the game, and then the former players are like, well, nothing's changed, I guess, cool.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing too, why it's really important to promote positivity, especially like we're trying to grow our community. I mean, our community's had steady growth for the past year. I think, the AU meta has been a thing for about a year now. But the big thing, even community leaders, players, players just showing up during the week, is to be positive, because it is really easy just to rip on, I don't know, like me back in 2019 ripping on Archons and Riot Quest models, right? But I mean, I'm still a little salty about that.
So it's a double-edged sword, right? It's like be positive, be constructive, I guess, might be a better way of putting it, because not being allowed to complain about anything, there's no point in that. We complain about stuff we love all the time. I mean, I love movies, and I will pick a movie to pieces when I'm like, but oh man, I wish they could have done this, It would have been awesome if they did this. But it's like, you've got to be constructive and you've got to articulate it. If you're just like, nah, they're just going to break it like they always do, or some like kind of stupid phrase, that gets thrown out.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
That's where okay, now you're just bringing everything down. So I do, I guess, defend criticisms, but they should be constructive, because overall, I think most of the people who are playing the game and are invested in the game and have put hundreds of hours in the game who are complaining are hopefully complaining with the idea that I really would like this to be better in this way so that I can enjoy playing this with someone else who might actually try the game if this thing were fixed.
Yeah, so one thing that, we kind of promote at my job is if you have a complaint or there's a problem, that's great. Like, what are your solutions for that? Like, you can come to me with a problem, but how is this going to, you know what I mean? Like, how would you make it better if you were sitting in the director's seat, so to speak?
Yeah, and I mean, it becomes a harder question at that point, because it's like, all right, Sherlock, how do you fix this one? Like, you adjust this, then what? Then what happens here?
Yeah, and And it's good too because you get other people's perspectives too, and you come up with solutions that you might not have even thought of in the first place. So you just got to come correct, everybody. Just come correct.
Oh yeah.
So before we started recording, Miranda and I were kind of talking a little bit about the marketing of Mark IV and just our initial thoughts about it, and the conversation was getting pretty good. So I was like, oh wait, we gotta table this. And
oh man, you're gonna make me remember recording. Like 30 minutes ago. Oh.
Now we're gonna so one of the thing again, so I'm a Mark I player. I missed Mark II, came back for 3. I'm hopping on a $100% for Mark IV. So as a consumer of privateer press products, guys, this comes from a place of love. I love your guys' games. The announcement that we got in July, I don't know if that is like the Mark IV announcement or if we're going to get something a little bit, flashier, more exciting come October.
I would hope so. It would be the best way to proceed, right? Like they've put out, and I don't know if you're done. I don't mean to step on what you're saying.
No, go for it.
But it's like, okay, July 26th or whatever, they put out that Primecast, like a 5-minute video. Oh, here's this model. Oh, P.S. Mark IV, bye guys. And you're like, what? Oh my God. Oh, the hype.
Yeah, like what just happened?
Right? But it's like that got the attention of current players that did 0 things to get like other new people interested. So after that, we had that very long article by Matt Wilson of like, hey, this is kind of what's going on. And I mentioned before, like, I think in the interest of trying to be transparent with their audience and trying to be like honest and, level with everybody of like, hey, this is kind of where we're at. We made too many models. It's like, well, we all could have told you that, but that's fine. And so, how are we addressing that? But again, that's all talking to the current player base. So yeah, with logically speaking, I would hope that whenever October comes, and maybe they're waiting to make sure that they have the support and infrastructure ready to sell a bajillion models, and Gen Con was probably a bit of a test for that. But yeah, come October, I hope, come out with some really cool marketing campaign, gorgeous painted models and these really awesome terrain boards, maybe some internally done battle reports, just some cool flashy stuff to help, put the feelers out for all the new players out there, people who haven't been following Privateer, because all of this stuff so far has only been shown to people who are already following the game.
Yeah, and yes, I agree with that. The other thing with if this is the announcement and we don't get anything else for new players in October, my initial thought, again, as a longtime consumer of the product, playing war games for almost 2 decades now, it seemed like it lacked confidence.
There is some of that, yeah.
Yeah, like that was the initial, that was the initial impression that I got. So my fingers are crossed too that we get something a little bit spicier in October.
No, they definitely need to bring some more there, because just the current audience is overall not where they want to be if they're being practical about it. Like Mark II was the height of Warmachine consumer market share. Mark I, was, I don't know much about it unfortunately, but I remember like whenever Mark II went into Mark III, there were so many players I knew who were like, this is a good time for me to stop. Whereas with Mark IV, I feel like a lot of people are going, oh, I'm cautiously optimistic. I really want to see where this goes. I'd like to come back. Some of the hesitation had to do with 3D printed models, which I don't think is too much of a concern, but time will tell on that. And then like how they're going to be able to handle those legacy armies. I feel like we should maybe dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, legacy models. So they mentioned it was Matt Wilson on one of the Prime casts talking about how they had amassed about a 2,000 model catalog by the end of Mark II, or by now, and it was this constant need to create new models, and it was kind of to the exclusion of everything else. And you can sell a model because wargamers, like we're all consumers.
We consume. Yes, we consume.
Like, oh, the new shiny thing? How can I put it in my pocket right now? I'll assemble it later. So it's like, it was probably kind of easy money, like, just put out the new thing. But now we're in this weird situation where there's this enormous back catalog of models that people can't even order from game stores because, they might not be able to fulfill that order because it was a plastic, or they don't have enough orders for that model to warrant another spin up of the model. And so you're dealing with all these, older players who are like, I have a lot of models. Am I going to be able to use these? What is October going to bring with the rules for all those legacy things? And I'm glad they put out their legacy armies notice yesterday with what armies are going to come out. So that helped alleviate some concerns, but now it's going to be like, well, how usable really are they? Because they're still coming out with new models. They're not even resculpting so far.
Yeah, so this might not be the most popular opinion, but so this is why I look at it, right? So I have a full Khador faction, I have all the Grimkin, and I have a full Pharaoh army and pirates. So okay, all right. So I guess my stuff is legal and prime. But I think this like legacy model thing is meant to be a 2-year bridge for your pre-existing players to eventually get them to go. Like at the end of the day, everybody new and your veteran players are going to be picking up one of these new army boxes.
Yeah.
I just think that the majority of these legacy models, it's just basically a bridge to get us there until more armies and more choices come out. I think once the dust settles in 3 years, I don't know how much table time legacy armies in general are going to see or be on the table.
No, that's fair. And you bring up a good point, because even with their initial launch, they're like, here's 2 armies, and then come November, the Khador box will be coming out. That's 3 armies by end of year, to start in their brand new edition launch. So in order to not completely alienate the other, enormous percent of their player base, they need some way of letting people be able to play with their stuff. And so 2 years, 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of unlimited format, like steamrollers and tournaments, probably for at least 2 years. I think it's, at least for our store, I think from talking with our community, it's going to be a lot of unlimited, definitely for the first year.
Which is great, honestly. Again, I look forward to still getting to put my Grimkin on the table, or my little Kayazi dudes on the table, or, any of them, because I don't know what casters are even going to be coming over. I'll be sad if I don't get to play the old witch in the future. I'll be sad if I don't get to play, Sorsha in the future. And I understand that they're like, oh, we're moving on, but it's yeah, but don't Yeah. I think people still want to be able to play maybe between the 2 different eras, right? A 30K version of Warmachine.
Yeah. We're actually, so quick sidebar, for our final steamroller in December for the year, our big send-off to Mark III is going to be a 50-point themeless steamroller. So you just take whatever you want. It's a little homage. Well, on that note, yeah, why don't we get into our last big topic for the podcast episode, and we're going to talk about women in wargaming. So to kind of lead us off into this, I pulled some really interesting statistics from the internet, from Dr. Google. So according to the Great Wargaming Survey, a census-like questionnaire conducted by the magazine Wargames, Soldiers, and Strategy every year, the estimated makeup of women in the hobby was between 1.5 and 2%. That was as of 2019. However, in D&D, it had massive spikes that year, rising to 39% women. And for strategy genre games, such as Civ 6, you're looking at 11%. So looking at Tried and True, our analytics, less than 5% of our viewers are women.
And I shared my analytics with you too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead, send it. What you got?
So, for my channel, again, been around for 10 years, and my snapshot for just preparing for this show, so it's just a few days old, for the last 28 days, the female makeup of my channel is 0.2%. 20% of 1% on my channel.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think it's fair to say it's just probably not that interesting to them.
So why do you think there is a lack of women at the war tables?
All right. I do have to start off by saying I generally detest this topic, just to be completely fair and open and honest about it. It's one of those things that I feel like I've always been, bugged with over the last, time I've had my channel, where people are like, oh, how do I get my wife into it? And it's I don't know, she's not interested. She's not interested, dude.
You can't make her be interested.
What, you want to try and trick her? What do you want from me? And so it was always
Right.
just like this ruffling sort of question, including at one point me getting an email from like a fairly large magazine saying like, oh, I'd love to hear your experience about women in wargaming and how you've been marginalized and mistreated in it. And I was like, oh, you already wrote this article for me. Cool. So it's one of those.
For the record, I've never been mistreated by my gaming community.
And neither have I. And it's one of those things where there seems to be like this controversy in it, and it makes me tired. Because it's like, look, I don't know. I go into the game store, like, no, I've never been worried about what's going to happen to me in a game store. I've never been, like you said, mistreated. I've had awkward things said to me because it turns out a lot of wargamers are also just awkward humans. I'm sorry. Like, if you have a problem with that, then that's kind of a you thing, not a them thing. So it ends up being this thing where I'm just like, oh God, I hate this topic. So I'm trying to approach it like, as analytically and controlled as I can. But if I sound a little pissed off at one point, you'll know where I'm coming from. So fair warning.
No, it's cool.
So why is that? I don't know. They just aren't interested because it's one of those things that is so niche. It's not interesting to most humans, right? Like, how many humans play war games in general? How many people in Hollywood knew what Warhammer was before Henry Cavill talked about it on interviews? And then even then you saw like Tom Holland be like, what is this? This sounds fun. It's like, nobody knows what this hobby is. It's like super ultra niche. And it was also ultra niche historically, like to guys who probably weren't all that successful with women. So it turns out women probably weren't interested in your stupid hobby either. So, it becomes one of those things. And so, it's become more democratized. There's more games out there. There's more skirmish level games and more types of games and more ways of playing that aren't just a straight one-on-one match, which is one of the other things that might get mentioned is like, women just don't generally tend to do that. It's like, some don't. It's not like women can't be competitive. They just probably don't find your particular niche of competitive stuff interesting. Like, sorry. So I feel like I'm getting ranty. I'm going to calm down.
No, you're good. You're good. So I agree with that. So when you kind of looking at the, when I was looking at the statistics, in preparation for this episode, I was like, oh, that is really interesting that, and I look at my D&D group, like, so when I used to play in the early 2000s, I would be the only, woman at the table. Now I've got like 2 or 3 other women that are sitting with me at the table. Yeah. So it's cool to see, okay, so not all tabletop is dead for this, demographic, but there's a lot of differences.
Well, and I would warn, and I would also separate just RPGs and like tabletop wargaming, while both considered in the tabletop genre, are pretty distinctly different things. Yes. So yeah, just to kind of continue on your point, like you're right, like the RPG side has definitely seen a huge boon in it after it kind of became, I don't know, a lot more popular in the last 10, 15 years, would you say?
Yeah, and then you have like Stranger Things on Netflix, right? So that's kind of put a spotlight on D&D and has, it's a little bit more mainstream. There's a new Dungeons and Dragons movie coming out.
But to be fair, like just to compare that, is, the same scene from Stranger Things happened in E.T. and it didn't do anything for the, RPG scene. And we all know that there was an old Dungeons and Dragons movie. There's 2 of them.
Yo, that Jeremy Irons movie, like, still holds a special place in my heart. I love that. I saw that in the theater. I love that movie.
Did you apologize to everyone else in the theater?
No. That movie has a special place of honor in our household. Like, yeah, if I want to get, like, drunk and just watch, like, trash.
Jeremy Irons hamming it up, like, taking that
Oh, my God.
So
He was if you haven't seen it yet, if I can make a strong recommendation, Jeremy Irons is D&D.
It's right up there with the Alien versus Predator series. So that didn't do anything to make women go play RPGs either.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But I do think that there is, so women are definitely like, we love playing video games too, right? But I think that narrative story, those narrative games, those games with a story and the role playing and stuff, I feel like that has more appeal to a broader audience. So taking our game group for our immediate community, those are the nights that we get the most women that come to the store. So if we're playing Warmachine Commandant, right, it's like 4-man, all for yourself. It's the fun, silly beat 'em up in the center. Iron Kingdoms nights, Escalation League. So yeah, the narrative stuff, I think it's it has more of an appeal, and it kind of pulls away from that competitive, mindset of that one-on-one, locking horns on the field of battle.
Yeah.
Which is when I recommended earlier, like if you're trying to expand your gamer group, look outside of Warmachine, look outside of Warhammer, and open it up to, the D&D community or whatever other tabletop group is happening in your area. One of the other stores that we play at down in Middletown, Born to Game, they have D&D sessions on the Sundays that we play Warmachine. And a lot of times, we have, men, women, kids, parents, whoever that come, check out our tables. Oh, hey, what is it you guys are playing, to kind of start that initial dialogue. But Miranda, you also brought up a really good point too. We were talking earlier. You can't force your hobbies on people.
It's just weird.
Yeah, you can't ram that down the throat. People like what they like. They don't like what they don't like.
Well, and it's like, so you got to kind of look at it clinically. It's like, well, okay, do you not like it because that is just a topic that is not particularly interesting to you? Which is kind of where I stand on, like, I don't know, Warmachine. Yeah, probably a pretty small percentage of women are playing it, but the women who play it love it. It's not like they feel like, oh no, do you feel specifically alienated just because you might be the only one in a room sometimes to play the game? I doubt it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was just going to kind of mention that too, like when that magazine, contacted you or whatever. I don't liked, and I kind of apply this for my full-time job and everything that I do. I don't look at myself as a female gamer, female war gamer. I look at myself as a war gamer that happens to be female, or a gamer that happens to be female. Like, we don't lead with that, and we don't want to lead with that.
Right? Because then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that gets attached to it. It's like, oh, I'm in here as a woman. It's like, well, great. Every loss is you as a woman. Every win is you as a woman. Like, now you just have this bizarre amount of representation you've taken on for no good reason. It's like, how about you're just a person? Like, that's cool too, and you should be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, getting in there and enjoying the game for what it is. There's nothing, to me, I don't think there's anything inherently, alienating to women in any of the current war games that are out there. You can play all kinds of weird stuff, and it's not even like women are, the shrinking violets, like so sensitive they can't handle it, because the biggest representation of women I've seen in a war game has been Malifaux, where they play with dead hookers. So it's like, no, you're fine. It's not like they can't handle things. It's fine. But you're right. Like, one of the other things about Malifaux is that it has so much moxie and story-driven elements to it that you're this little gang, you're doing these specific schemes across the board, and it ended up being just a little more appealing to that group. So good. Mm-hmm. Like, keep doing that. And other games keep doing what they're doing. And humans, being human, will find the things they like and just enjoy them.
Yeah, like that. So my first war game ever, which, like, my first love that will always have a special place in my heart, was Mordheim. Uh-huh. And I love the fact that it kind of had that squad RPG, leveling up, buying equipment. I was like, oh, this is like really freaking cool. And I remember doing like story campaigns with my gaming group, and it felt like that game specific, other than the art, like the art in the core rule book for Mordheim is like sick. Yeah. That's what got me into it, was the narrative, RPG element of that game. Like the skirmish, the wargaming was kind of secondary to that narrative play experience.
Yeah, and I think I generally feel more that way. Like more in the height of Mark II, when I was doing tournaments and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'll catch up on the lore at some point, but really I just want to crush face. Rah, this is fun. And then after a while, I'm like, you get tired of playing, and maybe you do a little more of the hobbying side, or you get tired of the hobbying side and you start reading a little bit more of the lore. Like, that's what keeps a game alive, is you really need all three of those elements to maintain a healthy war game. And so it's been nice to go back and read some of the lore. And Warmachine, the lore can be a little all over the place, but generally there's some really good books out there, like the story of Cain and his whole Hellslinger series. Like, that's some cool stuff there. So it's nice to be able to
the Butcher book, I think I killed that in a day and a half. That was a fun, delightful little read.
I did read through that, and I was like, yep, he's a jerk. I hate him still.
That's why I was surprised that Sorsha Zero didn't have Animosity Butcher when she came out,
right?
Because of the time period.
It should have been early enough, right? But
yeah.
I don't know. And that was actually one of the cool things that, and maybe it was a Mark I thing, but it was definitely a Mark II thing, like the second edition, or Iris 2 or whatever. There would be some lore moment that happened in the rulebook that had him have his new epic form or whatever. I think at that point for him, he had been censured by Queen Vanar for letting too many of his troops die. So his whole thing was just like, no, I need to protect more of Khador the next time I fight. And so to general players playing the game, they're like, whatever, this is the better version or whatever.
It's just a Rusk with a flag.
Yeah. Such a top-heavy model, but regardless. There were like lore reasons for it. And I'm like, oh man, that was always so cool to me. I loved that. It was one of the things that made it I don't know. Like there's a lot of complaints about there not being generic casters, right? Like you would like something that could be more representative of just you. I play this character, Bob the Warcaster. But you're always dealing with named characters. And so having the lore attached to that was pretty cool. I dug that.
Mm-hmm. So just on this, so what initially got you into tabletop gaming?
I always grew up playing video games, and none of my female friends played video games, to be fair. But
gotcha.
But I have 3 brothers, and we were all brutally competitive with each other, and so I just always figured like, no, I can do whatever, and so I always just took that as a fairly natural thing. But I didn't really know about wargaming until more like 20. So I was about 20 years old because. My older brother, he would run off with his friends and go play like Shadowrun and these other games and not exclude me because it was one of those like, I'm his loser little sister, so I don't get to go, and I really wanted it. So for whatever reason, it really like bloomed this, antagonistic interest. And so after being an adult for a while, I was like, oh, war games, like that's even cooler and that's even nerdier, and I could do this, like this is fun. So I don't know, like maybe a little bit of sarcasm, spitefulness to my family, but also.
But so, like, did you just like roll up to like a local store? Like, how did you get connected with your first community?
So my, I guess, boyfriend at the time, husband now, played Warhammer as a kid. Terribly ridiculed throughout all of his time doing so as a kid, but he introduced me to 40K. Then we went to the local game HQ, which was in Oklahoma City, and that's where I found Warmachine. So it was just really just walking down to a game store and being like, oh, this is cool. And then didn't get to do much with that community there. But when I came back to Albuquerque, I had my stuff. So I just walked into a game store and I'm like, hey, can someone teach me this game, please? So I just, waltzed in.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess that's the other thing too, where I kind of like to curb the conversation is definitely setting up like demo tables, like pretty tables in general that turns heads. So I know as Warmachine players, it's kind of hard for us to transition to, 3-dimensional terrain that goes vertical. I know my husband is fighting tooth and nail. He loves his 2D flat.
There's no reason for it.
It's flat.
If you like it so much, play a video game. I'm sorry. I just have, I hear you. I understand where you're like, oh, I want that precision. But, dude, the models are still hanging off the bases. Like, you're just not going to get it. This is an analog game for a reason. It might as well be pretty, especially if you want people to come and look at that game and be interested in it.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, like on your game nights, it's so important, like get to the stores, you have to have, that in-person FaceTime. And I think even with our store, we try and, make it a point to have one, like we have a demo Signar and Crick's army that was donated to us.
Oh, nice.
And we take that to the store with us and we just set that up in the back for anyone that's interested. Like, hey, you want to throw some dice? We got some armies here for you, to try out. Yeah. Pretty tables helps. Painted models helps.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you walk in and you just see, gray or metal models
or flat, boring tables.
You're just going to walk by it because it just doesn't look interesting. I mean, even Magic suffers that, and they have pretty artwork, but you really kind of have to be over somebody, which is weird to like see or appreciate any of that. So no, you walk in, and this is where 40K has always kind of ruled the roost, although Infinity has done an amazing job in their own right on it. So yeah, you've got these like cool like citadels standing up and these neat terrain fields with minefields and these objectives set up, and you're watching these tanks and little mans like all over parts of the board with firing happening back and forth, and you walk in, you're like, what is this? It's a whole diorama. And I don't know if you I don't play historical games particularly, although Bolt Action has some really beautiful stuff too.
What is that? Is it something in Allies?
Axis and Allies, yeah.
Is that? Those tables are like really cool.
Well, there's like the Napoleonic Wars even. Like the historical folks, they have been doing that forever. And they make full-on dioramas. You walk in, you're like, wow, this this is really cool. And that's like the part that captures the imagination. And then you can be like, oh yeah, there's this cool world. There's these semi-sentient machines that, you know, you can control telepathically, and they will go and fight for you in this, you know, kind of steam-powered, steampunky world. It's like, oh wow, tell me more. But if you just have placemats and circles and rectangles and unpainted models, yeah, people are going to walk by and just be like, where's the magic cards?
Yeah. The other thing too that helps turn heads is like community events. So once a year for steamrollers, we like hosting a charity steamroller. So we did our first food machine back in February. It was a huge success.
Oh, yeah.
We did it with our local food bank, and it was awesome. We had a bunch of people just like from the community, like, you know, fellow nerds, fellow gamers, men, women, you know, their families, they brought their kids just to check it out and help donate. But that's another way too to help with, you know, to strike up conversation and just expand your social circles in a way. And everybody always likes helping people, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously like a food bank thing is like just have at it, right? Like that, like the food machine thing, that was always really cool type of event. But just having events in general, some weekly thing or monthly thing at the store that gives someone an excuse for everyone to congregate around a similar interest that day, yeah, that's absolutely the way to do it. And that's really nice when you do see well-run game stores making sure that those are being organized. But they also need help from the community of people who are trying to represent, you know, their favorite game, showing up and actually like participating and helping generate that interest too, because a game store can only do so much on its own, but they didn't do a heck of a lot.
Yeah, it's the players in the community, that's the lifeblood, you know.
Yeah.
That keeps the community going.
I know. And so I'm looking forward to, like, again, it brings me back to Mark IV. I'm like, oh please, I really hope this is really good. Like with the revision of the Iron Kingdom's Requiem and now the new edition of Warmachine, like it seems like they're trying to kind of make it this whole, you know, across the board revision and resurgence, hopefully. But yeah, hopefully October they bring some.
I just hope they stick the landing. Privateer Press, if you're listening, like, you have such a great opportunity, great chance. Like, don't mess it up in October, please.
You have every opportunity to do this right. So
yeah,
you know, there's definitely enough people in the community who want it to happen, and there's always going to be naysayers, but they're going to buy your game too, so whatever, like.
Yeah.
I mean, this just happens to be how it goes, so.
Oh, that was still me 2017. I was like, F these Archons, I hate them. Yeah, I'll buy 2 Defiled, 2 Prime. Like,
2 Defiled in the Void, please. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's funny.
So, yeah, I don't know, as far as, like, girls in gaming, like, they'll come or they won't. I mean, and as gaming in general, as tabletop gaming in general becomes more popular, and you have things like Critical Role and shows that bring it more to the fore, it's just going to call more attention to it. So you're just naturally going to see more people to it, and then subsequently just more women in it. And then they're going to make a bunch of different types of games that are going to have a bunch of different varying appeals, and that's perfect, you know, like, let everyone find what they want to do. I do have an objection to anybody saying, oh, you don't have enough women playing your game, you need to fundamentally change. Because, like, look, they're not that, you're coming at it from the wrong angle.
Yeah.
It's like, you're just deciding something's wrong when there probably isn't.
Yeah, and it's like, even with, like, other business, like, I use the airline, you know, industry thing, like, I don't care what your stance is. I just want to get from point A to point B safely.
There you
like,
go.
You have a good product, you have a good service. Like, that's what's, at the end of the day, that's what's gonna,
right.
You know.
And so is changing it now going to cause more problems than it fixes? And does it even solve the problem you're trying to solve? Which usually it doesn't. Right. It's one of those things where you have to be, as cheesy as it sounds, you have to be true to yourself, right? Like, you don't run around changing yourself to try and appeal to other people. You are yourself, and then you find the right people to be your friend. And it kind of works for games too.
Fair point. Well, on that note, we are hitting just over an hour.
I don't know how long your show is, so I was just going to keep
I think, like, yeah, no, it's cool. I think it's about an hour is what we look at, like between an hour and an hour 10 topsies. So we can roll into the conclusion.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, you know, on that note, I think we talked about a lot of good things. Miranda, thank you so much for coming on the show and, you know, sharing your time with us tonight. And it was really cool picking your brain about Mark IV and all the excitement to come. Do you have any closing statements or?
I mean, obviously, thank you for having me on. This was really fun. I'm so excited to see another Wargaming Warmachine channel coming out too. And congratulations. I saw you are already over 600 subscribers. So
thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Keep rocking on. I'm so glad that you are doing so much that you are for the community where you are at locally. So keep on fighting the good fight. I'm so glad to have learned about you guys. So thank you. And then, yeah, as far as my channel goes, keep an eye out for some Mark IV battle reports. They will be coming.
Yep, and we're going to have in the show notes below Wargamergirl. It's easy to find. Can we add you to our Warmachine channels we like?
Yes, of course.
Sweet. Okay. Girl, you're going. All right, cool. All right, well, thanks again. That's going to conclude this episode of Tried and True. Let us know your Mark IV thoughts or any of the things you've done in the past to help promote tabletop gaming to a wider audience. And as always, see you on the next installment of Tried and True. Bye.